All right, everybody. Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Mike Sennello Show. Today we're going to be joined by Board of Finance member Joe DiGregorio.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. So today what we're going to be watching is something Joe and I had a chance to review over the weekend, which is the Board of Finance meeting from December. I don't remember the exact day. It doesn't matter. But for you guys at home, you guys didn't get to see this. This is a meeting that I recorded, but for myself, and we didn't wind up broadcasting live. So Joe saw some things in the minutes that looked kind of odd from that meeting and said, Mike, I know you recorded that, so can I come to the office and we'll go watch and review it? And as the two of us were reviewing this, we noticed some things we didn't really catch that, quite frankly, were, I don't want to say necessarily like disturbing, but
not disturbing.
Really...
But just telling as to how the process operates. I mean, that's really that's the crux of of any concerns that I had. I mean, I wanted to see the video because sometimes when you're sitting in a meeting and you're having a conversation with people and, things are flying around, you have multiple people talking, you forget exactly what happened. And, every meeting, every town meeting starts with an acceptance of the previous month's minutes, and you're expected to kind of like do a little bit of an edit and make sure that everything is, the spirit of what was said was reflected in the minutes. And that's why I wanted to hear it, because I was remembering things differently than what had actually occurred.
So this meeting, the part that's important is in reference to the $5 million budget surplus.
Well,
so folks,
4.XXYZ.
Well, no, we'll get into that in a minute. But the idea is, folks, that this budget surplus is something that's part of every budget, right? Mm-hmm. But it has not yet ever been anything remotely close to $5 million. No. And as you'll see, what Joe's intimated is that if it was $1.5 million, if it was $1.7 million, if it was $1.8 million, you could probably chalk that up to this is just kind of like part of the standard process. Mm-hmm. And in the end, since the voters know about like this being just part of the deal, right? Because that's what they're voting on. You kind of forgive it and you don't really pay that much attention to it. But when it's $5 million, Democrats in 2021, I forget what year it was, lost their minds over a $1.8 million surplus. And now we're looking at $5 million.
Yeah.
And as the more and more, I've talked about this on the show, but the more and more I've watched this video that we're going to watch that you guys haven't got a chance to see, so this is the first time you guys are going to get a chance to see this, the more I'm siding with Joe, who in the end voted against the appropriations the way they were described, and not because you were opposed to those appropriations. You just wanted this to be done in a means and a method that isn't just 10 people in a room.
Transparency. I think that I feel like every year during the budgetary process that comes up with me. Last year it was regarding the Board of Ed actually not having any capital listed in their budget, right? And I said, well, you expect that you're going to spend money on capital improvements or can make capital purchases. That should be reflected in your budget, right? And I kind of feel like that's analogous to what occurred at the meeting the other night in the explanation of what was occurring, But let's get into the video and we'll watch and we'll discuss.
So we're about to show this video. Folks at home, I haven't had a chance to share this video. We've got a totally different setup with a guest in studio here. So help us out.
This is a great studio.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Freaking awesome.
Yeah, right.
Like the mood lighting and everything.
So help us out, folks. Do share this. Let me know in the comments if you want me to upload the Board of Finance, the whole video, onto my channel in some way, so you guys can watch it at home on your own time if you'd like. We will probably be watching this at more than 1x speed at some point. We'll probably be jumping around a little bit to get to the parts that matter. But let me know if you guys want me to share this, and please do share this all over the New Milford pages so that people get a chance to see this, because again, this is the first opportunity anybody's really going to have to see this video. It took me forever to get edited. It took me a while to get all the sound just right. This is something I did on my own. This isn't a town video. The only people that have seen this so far were the people in the room, and there's going to be some things that are going to catch your attention. So,
and I'd also like to say that I don't speak for the Board of Finance, right? I mean, any opinions that I give are going to be entirely my own. Any commentary that I give is entirely my own. I have not discussed, anything that I'm going to say with, Walter or anyone else, on the Board of Finance or anything like that. So.
And one final thing before we go, of course, we're going to just be doing Q&A as we go. So if you've got comments, questions, Joe is on the Board of Finance, so he can answer certain questions that, we may not have we'll call him like the expert in the field, if you will, for having sat on the board. Right. So if you guys have questions specific to that sort of process, Joe can hopefully help us answer them. So
I'll do my best, but I don't know that I'd call myself an expert.
All right, let's get into this video. All right, do we want to start from the start and then make our jump arounds, or do you want to just go straight into the meat?
Whichever is fine.
All right. Folks, let us know if you want us to skip around to the part of the meeting where the $5 million budget surplus is discussed. As you can see in the bottom left, just about an hour for the entire video. We're probably not going to do all of it.
Call the meeting to order. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance.
So Walter has called everything to order.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
hey, there's you.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moment of silence, please.
All right, so while they're having their moment of silence, all the way on the right-hand side, that is Walter
Bayer.
Not Walter Bayer, Walter O'Connor.
Walter O'Connor.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's the chair.
Sorry.
In the green plaid is Greg Osipov. He is the finance
We
director.
have one person for public comment on the list.
Yeah, sorry. He's all the way to the right. You can't see Walter Bayer.
Yeah. Walter Bayer is all the way off to the right off screen with Barbara.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sean Emmons, 14 Norton Lane, Milford, Connecticut. I'm here tonight to speak for Public Works and Michael Boucher in a request of asking for a log truck, a debris grapple, and a chip truck for Public Works to help with their tree program. Mike so far has worked wonders with what he's got with the bucket truck and the new chipper. And I think to take this to the next level is definitely going to be the log truck purchase and debris grapple. This storm alone that you guys just faced this past week, that truck alone would have probably opened up 6 or 7 roads in a matter of no time versus bringing the payloader all the way out, moving.
So just real quick, since his commentary is going to be basically just advocating for one of the expenditures. So as far as the $5 million surplus is concerned, there's a certain amount that has been allocated as basically a deferral to next year, 1.7 mil, I think, and then about 2.6 mil in expenditures, which is almost double, not quite double, but almost double the norm.
I should have done this before. I'm going to see if I can pull it up on my phone.
And then there's a certain amount, a few $100,000, several $100,000 actually, that are just going to go into the unassigned fund. In the event that, let's say, the actual surplus, because this is a projected surplus, winds up being less, or if there's some emergency expenditure that we expect for this year, and then it would necessarily roll over into the next season. So again, about 1.7 million carried in force, about 2.6 million being spent. And you've got all the items right here. We don't have to go through that just now. But what Sean is basically doing is advocating for at least one of those larger expenditures, and we can get into what those are as we get going.
Moving debris or anything like that. And on top of it, if you do that with the payloader, you're sending a crew back out there afterwards to go through and clean up, where this truck can go in, grab everything, put it in the truck, and away they go. Macro burst 2018, Mike called us in, Candlewood Lake Road South. Prime example, road was closed. We used our debris truck, what he thought was going to take half a day, maybe a little bit more. We were in and out of there in an hour. Granted, we threw everything to the side of the road to open it up for the first responders, but still, that truck paid dividends in the long run of opening up roads. Definitely, I think you guys should be considering putting that in as the next purchase. It's going to help out huge, not just with the tree program, but and I'm not quite sure. I know other towns use it for this, but I don't know how many beaver dams they have. But they go out on other cities that we work with that have these trucks, go out, open up the beaver dams versus going all the way out there with a backhoe or anything like that. On top of it, right now, they're shutting down for a day with the tree program to pick up wood. And that whole program now is shut down.
Yeah, we should probably speed it up a little bit. I mean, I don't think that anything that he's saying is wrong. It would be interesting to see a cost analysis as to what the difference in expense is to, do as he said, to like buy the truck versus paying him, right? Versus having the town do it on their own time with their own equipment that is, not a unitasker, right? A log truck's kind of a unitasker.
Yeah, I mean, the point he's making, though, is fairly straightforward. So we can
it's efficiency.
Yeah. This expenditure will hopefully have a reduction in our operational expenditures, which we'll come back to. So we'll go up 1.5 speed for Sean.
Just having two guys go out. And now you're going to time this money in this business. And even with Public Works, you're not spending as much money with the guys going around 4 or 5 guys because you're going to need a payloader to pick the wood up or the grapple excavator that they have now. They're going to need 2 dump trucks to haul the wood, and then you're going to need 2 guys flagging. So right there,
so they have a
you got 6
grapple
guys out there
excavator.
doing stuff that 2 guys can do with just 1 truck.
Yeah.
The other item that he's looking for is a new chip truck for the town. Mike, when he first started this whole program, he asked me my opinion. It was definitely the last item I told him he should be looking at because they have a dump truck and they have a box that they can shoot the chips in. Well, those guys right now are cranking out some trees, and that right now is the bottleneck. Picking up wood is the bottleneck in it, and hauling the chips out from the chipping of the trees that they're doing. Right now, that truck is holding about 8 yards of material. The new truck that they're looking at is a smaller version cab-wise, but the body's bigger. And if he goes to like a 16 or a 14-foot body, instead of 8 yards of material, they're going to be hauling 30 yards of material. So that's a big difference right there. So I would definitely take the time, look at the numbers, especially that way.
As we were
and,
discussing right
give them
before
the consideration of
You want
looking
me to
into that
pause
truck, or both those trucks.
No, that's
actually.
all right. Right before the
They
video,
don't need a
that's
big one. They don't need one like I have.
$125,000.
That's 54 yards or anything like that. But you know, they definitely need a truck to move this material. All right. Thank you.
Mike, can we raise that mic up a little more? Microphone.
Oh, it doesn't. There's no PA system it's connected to. It's just. Yeah.
No more public
That was
comment at all? Okay, we'll move on to our next item. Board of Education requests from the Board of Education Capital Reserve account in the amount of $233,980 for the purpose of improvements in the Milford High School woodshop HVAC system.
Okay, so this winds up passing unanimously. We really don't need to go over this. This is totally separate
Yeah,
from what we're talking about.
we could probably skip ahead. Basically, what happened is when there was the fire at the high school, they noticed that there was a deficiency in the HVAC system for the wood shop because I guess they had to do some other upgrades to that system. And as a result, that was a repair that needed to be made so that the wood shop in the school could continue functioning. So that was a pretty general appropriation of funds. So.
Yeah, and we can talk about that another time. But let's get into the next topic here. I think this is about 13-ish
Mayor
minutes.
requests $4,491,178.24 in the town's reserve account for the purpose outlined in the attached addendum. Mayor, here, unfortunately, when I sent out this to the board, a lot of people weren't able to open it. I know Barbara says she
Okay,
has.
so do you remember what this was about?
I couldn't print it.
Pardon?
I
Oh,
couldn't
this is the
print it.
$100,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else
Is that
have
what that is?
difficulty viewing it?
No, I
This
have
is
it.
this is another interesting
Okay.
one.
I have a second on this motion.
Second.
Thank you, Walter. Are
So-
any questions on?
This appropriation is the Board of Education had to move from the East Street building, East Street School, right?
Yep.
To Sarah Noble because the boiler at the East Street School was having issues. So they went ahead and made the expenditure to move before they had the appropriation done.
Right. And there was $100,000 in unexpected expenses in that move.
$100,000.
All right, so let's jump ahead again. I think we were at what did we say? It was 23-ish. 23-ish minutes to get to where we want to be here.
How about, I don't know,
No.
next year, right? If we go through and we look at these items that were put on this list, right?
Nope.
Instance with DPW.
I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want,
Bond premium. And then when we're looking at the
voting number. So the tax sale brought in more money. We
Yeah,
got
we're getting close.
13 minutes, probably.
everything was expenditure driven.
I'm just waiting for everybody. I just didn't want I didn't want to talk over you before you started.
no, it's fine. I mean, it should really go to a referendum, not just the town.
Here we go. We're getting close.
Second. Thank you, Walter. Are any questions you don't have?
I couldn't
Computer.
print it.
Pardon?
I couldn't print it.
Couldn't print it. Okay. Anybody
You
else
can
have
probably just let
difficulty viewing it?
No, I have it.
Okay. Do I have a second on this motion?
Second.
Thank you, Walter. Are any questions on this? Go ahead, Joe.
All right, this is where Joe starts.
Before you start,
Let's slow
remember,
this
Town
down.
council passed this as a pack.
Walter's just reminding you that town council passed this as a package, so you don't have line item discretion. So you can't nitpick the thing. It's either all of it or nothing.
Package, which is what we will be doing as a package, and then it has to go to a town meeting for final approval. So we're not giving final approval tonight.
I understand.
No, I know, I'm explaining for everybody, and I just didn't want to talk over you before you started.
No, it's fine. I mean, it should really go to a referendum, not just the town meeting. And that's honestly my feeling. I mean, this is 5% of the town's budget. It should really be in the budget. A lot of these items should be budgetary items, but we'll probably get to that eventually. So where did this come from?
Surplus.
Surplus from?
Last year.
Did we make a mistake with the mill rate?
Pardon?
Did we make a mistake with the mill rate?
No, and of this 4.4 million, I'm just gonna use the round figures here, 1.9 is it, or 1.2 million of it is going towards 1.7 million is going to mill rate stabilization and tax relief.
Right? So that doesn't explain where $4,491,178 came from. Is it from investment income?
Came from
So that 4.4 million that he's talking about is the actual allocation that the Board of Finance is voting on. And that is, so the actual surplus was 5 million and change, but there was a certain amount that was just set aside to not be distributed. One of the things you could do in allocating these funds is just write checks to
To the taxpayers.
all the taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's one of the ways you could have spent that. Anyways.
Go ahead, Greg.
3.2 million of it was revenue driven. 2.6 million was expenditure driven. So approximately 3/5 of the surplus was revenues that came in higher than budget.
And these revenues were grandless growth, were selling gumballs. I mean, I don't know. What was driving
okay.
the revenue?
1.78 million more in taxes. We had a tax sale. And again, when you fix the mill
so
rate and
obvious
the
what your
gram
point is.
list, that's a picture at one point in time. There's lawful additions and subtractions that occur throughout the entire
So the
year.
1.78
that's
million,
like a floating.
right? If you hear what he said there, the 1.78 million, right, was taxes that were collected that were unexpected, right? Didn't he say
Yeah.
something to that effect?
Well,
And the amount of money getting rolled forward is the 1.7.
is that 1.7. So what he's admitting, what they're saying is, and like, this is what everyone has admitted to so far in this, is that there was basically a $1.7 million overtaxation of the taxpayers. That's what they're admitting to, right? And that's not anything to denigrate
not-
that.
yeah,
it's just
not-
that's what
I
happened.
don't think it's malicious.
Yeah, and we're not trying to be malicious in how we're characterizing it either. It's just the fact of the matter. That's how they're characterizing it, is basically just being a $1.7 million overtaxation. So there's two ways you could address that. One is to defer it into the next budget cycle, and the next is and the other is to just write a check.
Write a check.
Just write a check. And what's being discussed is in this allocation is deferring it to the next year.
Yes.
And with what we're going to see later on, the question of if this really is the case and you really are just trying to pass it on to the taxpayer, why not just write a check right now?
Why not write a check now? And then if you have these items, right?
Well, because this is completely unrelated to those expenditures,
Right.
because it's just carried in force to next year,
Right.
right? So the only thing I could think of is if you were using that because you knew that in the next year you were going to increase the budgetary expenditures for at least operations.
If you were going to have to, right? You're going to have to increase budgetary expenditures for operations because there's all sorts of other pressures on the town that require the budget to increase year after year after year.
Yeah.
Not
But
the
this
least of which is
But
salaries.
so folks know at home, the math behind this
Investment
isn't that we're expecting $1.7 million more on the municipal side of the budget in expenditures. It's that we're expecting 3.4. Because think about it. If we spent, let's use a nice even number. Let's say if we spent $98.3 million on a $100 million budget, that means in the next year, if we spend $101.7 million, we've spent $3.4 million more from one year to the next. Do you see how that works? Mm-hmm. Even though the budget only went up $1.7 million, if we actually spend all that money,
Right.
which we're going to get into.
Number. So the tax sale brought in more money. We got, we did very well in tax collections over and above what we budgeted. I see that as a good thing, not as a negative thing. I see it as the tax collector doing her job and doing it well. Licenses and permits, that was $194,000 more than budgeted. Intergovernmental revenue, $92,000 more. Charges for services, $556,000 more. Investment earnings, $20,000 more. And other revenues, $612,000 more than budgeted.
So
And then
$500,000
what was
in
driving the
building permits.
expenditure side, the $2.6 million in expenditures?
in general terms, in general government, we were $480,000 under in that category. That makes up all the administrative offices. Public safety, $369,000. Public works, $438,000. Health and welfare, $224,000. Culture and recreation, $227,000.
And these are all from the expenditure side, the things that
Yes,
the town
that's
spent
the
less
expense.
money on.
That's
So we
right.
over budgeted in certain categories that ended up with that.
We're under budget in certain categories. in
Right, that's
those
a semantic
particular
Yeah,
categories.
that's just
Do you wanna speak?
purposely
I
obtuse.
also wanted to connotate, we got $1 million in our bond premium. And then
Which
what
is
we're looking at
legitimately
the,
unexpected revenue, right? I mean, when the town goes out for
Yeah.
a bond issue, you don't always know what sort of terms you're going to get, and sometimes you'll actually
You
get
have floating and variable terms, and then
Right.
if you have 2 or 3 bonds where those terms are floating, and you've got one $3 million bond, one $10 million bond, one $7 million bond, right? The bond payments, the interest payments on those things are going to be several $100,000 per, and as you add them up, right, like a 20% savings in the annual payment could be $1 million.
right. Or sometimes investors will actually give you money. They'll say, "Hey, we'll give you an extra $1 million for your bond because your credit rating is so strong."
Yeah,
right?
it was probably just notes sold on discounts, and we absorbed the discount.
I'm just saying, there's any of a
Finance
number
terms,
of things.
finance terms
But-
that are probably going to go over everybody's head.
but that's a legitimate revenue line item that we would not have expected.
And it's $1 million of that capture.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
not the first time something like that's happened, to be honest with you. I mean, in the 10 years I've been on the Board of Finance, it's definitely not the first time. And as we were discussing before, on an annual basis, I mean, these things happen. And then at the end of the year, you kind of see what you got and you figure it out in the budget. So it rolls forward.
Yeah. In a vacuum, a non-story. But as you guys will see, this is not a story being told in a vacuum.
expenditures. Every week I meet with the department heads. And every week we go over the budget, we go over the operations. So it's fine tuning those, and some of the things is either through efficiencies. For instance, I'll just give one example, DPW, as it's brought before. So DPW, we have an ice and road program. So we started that about 2.5 years ago. So what happens is prior to that, when you had ice that sheaths across the road, okay, sometimes they'd have to go back out, which would cause overtime, material, costs. Well, in the summer and spring, we go in, we do the
way
drainage.
overestimating
It
overtime.
could be on the shoulder of the road, clean a swale, and then that reduces them to having to go back out
It'd be the first
again
time that we went over
on
overtime.
overtime.
So
And
you never
on
know what the winter's
materials.
going to do.
And
There's been
redo
years where
that
we've had
because
tons
we
of
were
ice. I mean,
proactive rather than reactive. So the whole measure now
I
is to
guess.
be more proactive in that, thus reducing the cost. But some of the stuff, we won't see the ROI for a year or two because we don't know until we quantify it by seeing that actual thing happen. For instance, like that one instance with DPW.
Okay, so
I'm not
hold
trying-
on. This is a really, really important point to point out here, and it's going to build towards what we're going to talk about towards the end here. But all of this millions of dollars in expenditures, right? The $125,000 truck you talked about, the $400,000 was a grapple truck, or a tree truck, or a logging truck.
Well, I think it was 400,000 altogether, right? The grapple truck's 250, the chipper's 60, the chip truck's 125. So all of that stuff,
We should not be making these purchases if there isn't going to be an operational gain realized, right? We should see operations in terms of our budgetary expenditures go down, and
Right.
it should over time exceed the amount of capital that we're going to, because the capital that we're foregoing by expending this money, right? So
Yeah,
that's the idea. We should absolutely see, let's say in next year's
But
budget,
by making
the
the-
operational dollar amount go down.
right. By making the expenditure now, right, there should be some sort of impactful gain to the taxpayer moving forward, not only in efficiencies budgetarily, right, like in terms of the town operating more efficiently, right, but also in the budget itself, there
Yep.
should be some sort of a gain. So if we're spending this $5 million now, I mean, it probably wouldn't work out this way, but maybe we see the budget go down by $500,000 dollars per year.
Yep.
Over
what it would be at least.
Over over the next 3, 4, 5 years, something like that, right? Because these capital items are on our capital budget, our 5-year capital plan or our 10-year capital plan, and now they're coming off.
Well, and here's
Right?
the
We're
thing.
making the purchase now instead
This
of 2
isn't the
years from
argument you and I are making. This is just a statement of fact, and they're even making this argument here in this
Right.
in this meeting, and it's been made the entire time. Like, the reason you spend this money at all is to realize that gain, and the reason we're spending it now is because in 6 months you have 6 months worth of inflation or an inflationary effect to absorb, rather than putting it on the budget referendum. Now,
I would say that's icing on the cake, right? Like the savings, the savings that are in relation to time value of money, like that's just icing on the cake. That's like, hey, we're spending $100,000 now instead of $106,000, next year or the year after or something like that, because you can't predict what the market's going to do.
Yeah, but there's a question then, because the single most important condition that we have here is, do we have the consent of the governed?
That's my
Does
argument
the taxpayer,
from square one.
Right, and here's the thing. Is it worth it? This is a very serious question. I hope the folks at home understand. Whatever that 6-month inflationary effect is, and at this point it's not even 6 months. It's going to be like 3. Whatever that 3-month inflationary effect is, is that really going to be so much to offset the due consideration of consent of the governed at home? Because again, this is going to go to a town meeting. This is going to go to a town meeting on Monday. On Monday. So, folks, if you're opposed to this, you got to get there.
What time? 6 p.m. 6:30?
6 p.m. 6 p.m.
Or
in the
6:30?
E. Paul Martin room.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't have it.
And here's the thing. That there's going to be maybe 5 people in the room.
That's it.
Outside of the elected officials and the people who are under the town's employ, and me. Right.
Well, usually the people who show up are the people who have a dog in the fight, right? The people who are really advocating for those particular items, right?
Is that a representative sample of the voting populace of taxpayers in this town?
I mean,
but here's the thing. You mentioned
I can't say yes or no, right? I mean, because I don't, but what I do believe is that it's the people who have, really care about those particular items that show up or that know about it. And to me, the know about it part when you're dealing with something that's this large is the bigger issue. I don't necessarily think one way or the other on any single one of those items that it should be in the budget or it should not be in the budget. I have my own opinions, but they're not very strong ones. But the biggest thing for me is that if you're looking at 60 people in a room, right, versus an average voter turnout of 3,000 people, right?
At least, yeah.
I mean, I don't think either of those groups of numbers are 100% representative of the town of New Milford, but at least those 3,000 people is a larger sample size.
Well, again, the referendum provides significantly greater opportunity and awareness of this event, especially because it's a regular thing.
Right.
Right. So,
and if it's in the budget's printed in the newspaper, and people have a period of time that they can look at it, and we have 2 weeks of budget hearings.
And again, when it comes to the political to the politic in this town, that's the one thing you can guarantee every year. Mm-hmm. Like, as a town councilman, that's the one thing you better have some experience with and have understanding with, because it's the one thing you're going to run into no matter what.
No matter what.
Right? So, like, if you have 5% of that $100 million as the thing that's being decided upon, and it's not the $1.5 million that is just baked into, the $1.5 million surplus is just baked into the thing. Mm-hmm. 5% of 3,000 people, and 3,000 guys. You guys have seen that I've put the Excel documents together. I've shown you guys the voter turnouts. Like 3,000 people at one of these referenda is really not that great a turnout, right? 5% of that's 150. When was the last time there were 150 people, other than last week when we had the football team in? Right? When was the last time that there were 150 people in the E. Paul Martin room? Were there even 150 people for the children's center stuff?
Maybe.
Maybe?
The Gronbach period kind of had a few.
Maybe?
Had a few large turnouts, but I don't know if there was 150.
I don't
Maybe
think
some of
there
the
was
Panda
either.
stuff.
I still think you're only talking like 80 people, 90 people.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So what's going to wind up
remember it being a
happening is,
bigger
outside
crowd.
of the elected officials and the town employees, we're looking at tops 5 people making this decision. And this is the point that you're going to be getting to.
Well, 5 people making the decision, and maybe 9 people deciding what's actually on the list, right? Because you have town council and the mayor making a decision of putting all these items on there, which
All right.
Trying to be argumentative. I just want to get a picture of how did we end up with such a large amount of money? I mean, $1 million, 1.5 is pretty regular, but hitting a number this high, I want to make sure that it wasn't the fault of miscalculations or something like that, that we as the Board of Finance can be proactive in applying towards setting the mill rate for the upcoming years. I just want to make sure that,
And Joe, I might add, the audit, I signed, well, I'll say further in my report, but
and I just
the
want to make a
auditors will
point
be
there.
here at the end
So,
of next.
This is an important point about how our government operates, right? So the Board of Finance doesn't have line item control over the budget. So anyone listening out there, like, you can come to us and say, hey, we think this category, right? Because that's what we have control over, is categories in the budget, like personnel and contracted obligations and that sort of stuff. That's what we actually can adjust up and down. We don't have the ability to say, hey, cut that position from that particular organization, or hey,
The way the departments do, yeah.
right, yeah, or hey, we're going to take $5,000 out of capital expenses for next year.
Actually, the town council has a lot more say in that matter.
Right. But what we do actually have control over is setting the mill rate for the town.
Yep.
Which is what
you guys wind up paying.
right, which directly correlates to your tax bill, right? Yep. So, I kind of took offense to the fact that I'm sitting there with a $5 million, list of wants, in my opinion, right?
Well, we'll get to that.
Right. That were the result of, either over budgeting or, windfalls or whatever the basket of return was, because in the future, I don't want to be pumping up that mill rate another 1% or 2% or 3% if there's fat to be cut in the budget, because, I don't want to take more of your money if I don't have to. That's
Next month, and they'll be discussing the audit. So this is all part of the audit. I signed off on it. It's still in its draft form, but the final form will be forthcoming.
Greg, could you send us those numbers, please? I was trying to jot them down. I couldn't keep up. Thank you very much.
I have more questions, but I don't want to dominate if anyone else has
Go for
questions.
it.
Go ahead, Joe. Why don't we finish up with Joe, and then after he finishes, we'll call on whoever else has questions.
Sure. So we did apply landfill settlement fund in this current year's budget, right? Towards
Did not use it.
we did not use so no money was withdrawn from the landfill settlement fund
That's
account
correct.
that we could put back with this overage, right? So, I'm really proud of this.
No, if we're running a surplus,
That's awesome.
I would not we didn't bring in money from the internal service fund,
But there's an
nor
obvious
the
reason you
waste
asked.
That was my
management
next
fund.
question. Was in terms of
Neither, no. I didn't see, that would just add to the surplus.
Could also kind of say we've not used the landfill settlement fund for the last 2 years.
I was,
Yep.
Okay, so you said you're working on the audit. Have you been working on the budget for next year?
Yes.
Okay, so in the budget for next year, right?
This is
If we
great.
go through and we look at these items that were put on this list, right? If we're looking at this as an avoidance of capital expenditure, how many of these items that are on this list will be reflected as a deduction in the budget for the 23-24 budget cycle? Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if we were scheduled to
Can I
spend,
answer a question first before you finish
that's
that?
a little rude.
You asking a projection of the 24 budget, where those items are gonna be in there.
Yeah.
They haven't even come close to starting the 24 budget yet.
He just said that.
He just said that.
Yeah.
He just said that like 10 seconds ago, right? And like, here's something we've gotten to this point here where, like, I see why Walter is stepping in. And I think this is just the realization you guys that we had over the weekend. Like, look at you can't see the expression in Walter's face, but you can see his gesticulation. It's so obvious the point that you're trying to get at here.
Yeah.
Like, so folks understand at home, like, Joe is Joe has asked all of these questions knowing that he knows the answer to all of these questions, right? This is the Socratic method, where you ask questions that you know the answer, or that you probably know the answer to, not because you're trying to necessarily get the actual answer, but because you're trying to build towards a conclusion that you're trying to get the person you're asking these questions to realize themselves, to basically say out loud.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
That's
it's not really like grilling a witness at the witness stand, but the idea is, instead of me just saying the answer, saying the thing, and then you just knee-jerkingly saying, no, I'm not doing that. it's a way to get you to just say the thing.
Yeah, I'm not a great lawyer, but I'm trying to build a case to find out, is there going to be a reduction in the budget that's going to be reflected by the expenditures?
And it's so obvious that we already brought this up.
Right, because they're pitching this as a tax avoidance mechanism, right?
Right.
By making this expenditure today, you're not going to be making that expenditure or a greater one tomorrow, right?
Right.
So
And it should be reflected in next year's budget.
It should be.
In some way, at least, right?
Or in the capital plan. Hey, you know what? We took these items. We looked at our capital plan. We said, what in the next 5 years are the things that we actually really need the most? What do we need? We need a logging truck because we're spending, $200,000 a year to pay, whoever's, tree company to come and, remove the logs for us. So, this truck will last 5 years. We'll save a bunch of money. I mean, whatever it is.
Yeah, I talked about this on the show. I actually had a speech prepared. I wanted to talk about this at town council. And my take was like, okay, we'll go ahead and vote for this thing. Mm-hmm. But I'm only doing this because you guys are cashing in all of that political will right now.
Right.
All of that good, how would you describe it? All of that, well, I guess
political capital?
Political capital, yes.
Yeah, political capital.
You're cashing in the political capital, right? Like, okay, Pete, we love you. We love you. We've seen what you've done.
I think he's one of the greatest mayors the town's had in recent memory.
In my memory, no offense to Liba, no offense to Bob.
Yeah, yes.
Like, as
Bob.
far as my memory goes back,
like
he's
Liba.
no offense to what's her face? She's gonna kill me for not
Pat
no
Murphy?
Pat Murphy.
She appointed me to the Board of Finance.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No offense to any of these people, right? He is the best mayor that I can remember. And he may be the best mayor we've ever had, since we've only had a mayor since like 92. But like, you're trading in all this political capital. Most of the councilmen there are councilmen that we love. Mm-hmm. And we absolutely would vote for again. So you're trading in all this political capital and you're saying, trust us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to say this is $5 million. So, okay, but this better damn well be reflected in the budget next year. As in, there better be basically nothing in capital, right? With all the ARPA money that we've doled out, $8 million in ARPA money, and how many millions of it went to these departments for these sort of things?
Well, I think that was kind of like a thorn in my side, like going into this. I kind of felt like, as I'm sitting there asking these questions, I was a little upset, looking at it, I don't feel like I looked that upset, but I really felt very upset because I was kind of against a lot of the spending. Again, like not on because of the items that were in it in the ARPA funds, but just that it was like a laundry list of all these small purchases that I didn't see turning into reductions moving forward, right? I would have much rather have seen that $7 million get spent on large projects, the bike trail, fixing Boardman
And
Bridge.
here's where he and I are going to disagree.
Right, well, whatever. You could also just give it back to taxpayers as a tax rebate.
Well, legally you couldn't.
You couldn't. But
so that's why I was trying to find ways to circumvent that, and that's why I suggested the homeschooling fund.
Homeschooling fund, whatever it was, I would have rather have seen an endowment like the landfill settlement fund
for
help for homeschooling.
Yeah.
Like something like that would have been life-changing for so many people in the community,
Yeah.
But instead we got AED packs and trucks and cars and gumballs and,
Again,
not really gumballs,
here,
but,
Joe and I are going to kind of disagree, but the point is that you already got these capital expenditures, right? And then you're going to get another $2.6 million in capital expenditures, which means two things should happen in the budget. Capital better be effing close to zero. Effing close to zero. And I don't mean like $600,000 close to zero. I mean $600 close to zero, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if that's the case, then we should necessarily, at very least, have the operational budget be like flat or close to flat, right? And then you got to build the case and sell to the taxpayers.
At least as a starting point.
Yeah.
I mean, that's again, like we're in the middle of renegotiations with some of the unions and the labor organizations and such, and you have the rate of inflation, which I guess we'll talk about shortly, right? That's like through the roof. That does affect our budgeting.
Yeah.
Pretty significantly, and so we're gonna see increases coming into the next budget cycle.
But they should be offset by the realized gains.
Yes. Right.
Right.
And if they're not going to be offset by this, then that money should go back to the taxpayers.
Right.
So that it could effectively be offset by that.
Right. And here's the thing: we don't. If you guys, the taxpayers, completely disagree with us, that's what the referendum is for.
And please tell me.
Right.
I'm sitting there representing you guys. If I'm 100% wrong, I want to hear it. Like, I can't tell you how rarely someone actually comes up to me on the street and says, "Hey, Joe, that thing that you voted on, that was dumb," or like, "Hey, this thing is going to come up and it would really affect me if," just like you were talking last night with Senator
Steve Harding.
Steve Harding, and he was saying like, "Hey, those little interactions are almost so much more impactful than sitting there going over the budget and thinking like, oh, well, this year it went up 2% instead of, last year it was 3%. Well, that's good. And this one went up 7% instead of 5%. That's bad. Maybe we could find a way to reorganize these expenditures. It's not.
Yeah. So this only works when you have the capital, the political capital, right? Like if you don't have the trust, if you're a first-term mayor, don't do this. Don't do this. Send this out. Send out checks. Sell the budget.
Right.
If the budget's going to be a huge increase from one year to the next, sell it. And by the way, this is an election year, right? So if this is what you're selling us on, and we don't see this in the budget, this is an election year. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
I really hate to say it. But I don't think it's going to affect my vote, but it's going to affect a lot of people's votes.
Yeah, I mean, invariably, this sort of a thing could very well be a political football.
Yeah.
And it's going to get kicked back and forth.
Like I said, the Democrats lost their mind. Well, the DTC lost their minds over 1.8.
I mean,
this is 5.
Yeah.
So
1.8's not.
But like here's the point though. You're making it painfully obvious. It is painfully obvious the point that you're trying to make here, and it's just nonstop deflection and obfuscation here. So to me, this is a loss of political will to me.
Yeah.
This is a place where trust becomes a problem. And then the only way you have consent of the people is to say, screw it, checks go out, we're going to put this we're going to deal with this. Or at the very least, wait 3 months, have it be a referendum question.
Yeah.
Done.
Put it in the,
yeah,
in the vote. You have another box. Would you like to spend the $5 million on this list of items?
So I would say when I was watching this in editing, this is not the point where I'm like, okay, now I'm opposed. Right, like I'm not on board there yet. I'm still in the, all right, let's do it. Let's see what happens. But folks, we'll keep watching.
That he did.
But he's still got to go to the department heads. The department heads has got to go to the mayor. From the mayor, it's got to go to the town council, then to us.
So, but you have a projection.
I don't know what the request will be because I put in numbers, Joe, that I'm responsible for.
That's right.
And none of them are capital items. Those would come from
Well,
the
a non
departments.
sequitur.
So
the departments have until January 6th to put their request for their operating budget and or capital at that point. So I have no idea what's going to be requested.
Okay.
Would some of these been requested? Well, certainly not now because
But the point isn't that like you're not saying, okay, what's the dollar amount for next year? What's the dollar amount that it went down by? You're asking for a broad statement of, all right, well, because of what we're experiencing here with this windfall, we should expect that it would be at least less than what it would be up without the windfall. And they're just not willing to say it.
I think the answer very easily could have been, hey, these were capital items that were in our 5-year capital plan.
Yep.
Or that the departments were asking for. And so we've taken them out of the budget and put them here in this, right? Like where did these items come from then? If it's not a request from the department, where did we come up that these things are things that we needed? I mean, it's kind of funny. Actually, the Parks and Rec is there. What's his name? From
Dan
Parks?
Calhoun.
Yeah, Dan Calhoun. And he actually said one of the items that was on there was I think he says it in a moment here. It's the $8,000 for the fixing the tennis courts or something to that effect.
Yeah, crack filling.
Crack filling at the tennis courts. And like, oh yeah, he's like, no, I was going to ask for that in the budget, and now it's out, which is like great. Like that's like
Fine.
great. Like fine. You got a green light on that $8,000 now because like I know that it's gonna, it's actually going to have an impact.
Well, and that's where we kind of have to laud Dan because Dan is just explicitly saying, imagine what we would have for next year. Subtract 8,000.
Subtract 8,000.
But
which is great.
here we're not getting that.
And my fear in any of these instances is that deflection means, well, now we've opened the door for them to ask for something else.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, and
this is the main point.
And that's my biggest fear because this is budget creep, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh, hey, we have some extra money. Let's just spend it. And then we'll ask for the same amount of money we asked for last year, or maybe even a little bit more because we can get it passed. And then the budget grows year after year after year. It's just like, and it doesn't stop. And you never, and it hurts people. It's.
Oops. Hang on.
Oops.
I screwed up a transition. It wouldn't be an episode of the Mike Sennello Show without technical difficulties, would it? All right, let's go. Keep watching this because there's some other points to bring up here.
Because obviously, this went before council and it's now coming before you, and then it'll go before, a town meeting. And obviously, if it passes those 3 hurdles, they're not going to show up in the general fund budget.
So, the chip truck and the chipper and the grapple truck, these are capital expenditures that are extra budgetary.
Yep.
They're not in the capital plan, right, for the 5-year plan, where this would be a reduction in future spending.
I couldn't say. I don't have the capital plan at my fingertips. I'm not certain.
Where did it come from?
How about, I don't know, what would be another thing that would be in the budget? Tennis court crack repair. Is that something that we're planning on doing for the next budget cycle?
It depends on the request from the department heads.
So to answer your question, and Dan Calhoun's here from Park and Rec, that would be in next year's budget.
So when you make your proposal for next year, the taxpayers can assume that your budget will be, well, how much was that one? I don't even know. I just had it here a second ago. Here we go. $8,000 less.
Correct.
For the next budget cycle.
Correct. It would not be, well,
Potentially less, Joe. That item won't be there, but we don't know what the total budget is yet, and I'm sure that Park and Rec hasn't gotten that figures yet either. So it's just a potential. The other thing,
He just
the
said
point I
yeah,
want to
and
make, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, let me finish, is instead of putting this in the budget, okay, if we put it in the budget, next year's budget, it's gonna increase taxes. By spending the reserve, the surplus that we've got, it's actually saving taxes, and it's not double taxation on
I
the
don't get this point.
town.
So is it fair to assume that if, as the taxpayers of the town of New Milford, if we approve this and we send this to a vote, a referendum or a town meeting, I think it should be a referendum because really we should give all of the taxpayers, not just 60 or 100 people standing in a room, the chance to vote on whether they want to spend this money on these items or use this money as a tax rebate, either in the form of a check or direct to the budget, which are both options that we could have because this is an unexpected overage in our budget. Now, if they can assume that this is just a laundry list of things that are wants and not needs that are expected to be applied to the next budget where they will actually see a reduction in expenditures, that's something that they need to be made aware of and they need to make a decision on.
Well, again, Joe, a lot of times capital requests are made. They don't ultimately find their way into the budget because, number one, we're mindful of, keeping taxes low, reasonably so, and we have to deal with a 2.5% spending cap that's imposed by the state. And if we exceed that, we get penalized in state revenues to the tune of 50 cents on the dollar for every dollar we're over the 2.5% cap. So, typically capital items are the low-lying fruit that wind up not making.
Can you
the way
just
into
repeat
the
that
budget.
again? Yeah, can you
It's just
just
a holy
repeat
shit
what you just said again? Because I want to make sure that I understand.
About the cap.
About the cap, yep.
There's a state cap that the entire state follows. It's mandated by the state. You cannot exceed this current budget by more than 2.5% in spending. Otherwise, we get penalized. That's been in place for years. So we always have to be mindful to stay within that 2.5% spending cap.
And how much would that be?
That's kind of an irrelevant point right now, but this, folks, if you're watching at home, this should be your holy shit moment. Like even Joe Troiano sitting right next to you is like, wait, what? Excuse me?
So, and I think that what he's saying is actually a little bit disingenuous because what the rule actually says is that it's 2.5% or the annual rate of inflation, right?
Which could be even more than that.
Which
Yeah.
could be even more than that. And it's over the previous year's budget. So it's not, it's not like extra budgetary spending or anything like that. It's the idea or the spirit of the law was to, and if you look, it was only, you have it up on the screen?
Yeah, let's bring it up for everybody to see.
Yeah. So the spirit of the law was to, and it was passed in 2017, so it's not that old. I mean, I guess it's 6 years old. It's not that old. And I think it applied to the 18-19 fiscal year, was the first year, to try to cap municipal mill rates from increasing, faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, because some towns in Connecticut, that was a real problem.
Yeah, runaway mill rates. Yeah,
runaway mill rates, because it affects your property tax, and then that, inadvertently, as we all got our tax bills over the last month for our businesses, it affects businesses as well, because if you have an equipment heavy business, or has a lot of trucks or something like that, and a lot of equipment, you could be paying bucket loads of money with these mill rate increases.
You want me to just read the important parts of this thing?
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
All right, so municipal spending cap, beginning in, and we're going to skip to paragraph 3. I'll highlight so you guys can follow along. Beginning in fiscal year 18, the Office of Policy Management, must reduce the grants to municipalities whose spending, with certain exceptions, exceeds the specified spending cap. The cap is the greater of the inflation rate, or 2.5%, which this year, I don't know what the CPI is going to be.
Well, right now it's 6.5%. So who knows what it's going to be? And that's that's December 22 is 6.5%. So
or more of the prior fiscal year's authorized general budget expenditures. Towns that increase their general budget expenditures, not the actuals.
Yeah, not actuals.
Over the previous fiscal year by an amount over this cap, receive a reduced revenue sharing grant.
Right.
The reduction is equal to 50 cents for every dollar the municipality spends over the cap. This is extortion. The law does not give OPM discretion in applying these grant reductions. Folks, in the comments, we're going to pull away from this. Let me know if you want me to bring that back up so you guys can go over it. But this is kind of the holy shit moment.
It's a crazy law, and it's a crazy place to put incentive for municipalities, and it starts to point to what was actually happening.
Yeah.
With the Board of Finance meeting, and what I was kind of alluding to throughout that process, which is that the towns aren't incentivized to have transparent budgets.
Yep.
They're incentivized to keep their mill rate increases low.
Yep.
Right? So even if you don't need a little bit extra money, if you can find a place to put it in the budget,
yep.
Right? You're incentivized to do that, because you could actually then utilize that money to knock off some of these items extra budgetarily.
Yeah, so here's what we're looking at. What are the chances that they knew that they were going to need these chip trucks, that they knew they were going to wind up spending this money, but there's no way to build that into the budget without having the budget go up from one year to the next by more than 2.5%, which until this year was the cap.
And I'm not against spending extra money, like when you get a bond, a windfall on a
but
bond,
we gotta know
or something
about
like that, right? But we have to know about it, and it has to be voted on.
So it sounds like, and I have a hard time. I know I'm not playing Hanlon's razor here, but, and I know this isn't the most steel man of takes here, but it sounds like what they're basically admitting to is that you floof certain items on the budget so that when it comes time for the end of the year, you can purchase these capital expenditures, the low-hanging fruit, if you will, that are so much money that if you put them into the budget, you're definitely going to go over that 2.5% threshold.
I mean, that kind of feels like what was happening.
And this is where,
I
said,
I can't say that that's definitively what it is.
But here's the thing: it seems like it could be. It could well be the case. And if it isn't,
I don't feel like year after year after year. And I'm gonna, I'm just gonna, obviously I'm part of the process, right? So, so there's that. So I've never felt like, oh my goodness, we have all this ridiculous extra budgetary spending that we shouldn't have, right? You know what I mean?
But that's not even the issue. The issue is, do the voters know about it? Is that how they're voting come budget season?
Is there a way to quantify, right, what's occurring, and are we having a transparent process where items that we need are actually put in the budget, and that's what's being voted on, right? I mean, that's my concern. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that where you were headed? I don't
Well,
know.
well, yeah, that's just it. Like, here's the thing. Like, here's the thing. Like, here's the thing. Like, if we know in advance that, listen, we kind of have to floof some of these department, expenditures, these operational expenditures a little bit to get these capital expenditures that we know we have to get, right? And it's the only way to avoid losing the extorted state money. Which, because it's extortion. I don't know how. The state's extorting us in this matter. I don't know how else to.
It's a silly thing to. I mean, what benefit is there to that? I don't see what it is. If you're Groton, Connecticut, or something somewhere in the middle of nowhere where maybe you don't have a great tax.
Yeah.
Maybe Groton has a bunch of people there, I guess, right?
Union's in the northeast corner, and it's in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Right. So if you're Union, Connecticut, and all of a sudden you have like a massive disaster on your hands, and I don't know, a terrible winter and all this sort of stuff, or your trucks break at once.
Stop. You're Brookfield, Connecticut, and you've got a macro burst you have to deal with.
Right, and you have to make a whole bunch of spending, right? So how do you then negotiate that in your actual budgetary spending? You have no choice but to either,
supplemental appropriations.
Supplemental appropriations, maybe, right? Or bond, right?
Or,
you have to go to
dipping
borrowing,
into your emergency funds.
Dipping into your emergency funds,
which actually that is the place for like the unassigned fund and the contingency funds.
Right,
that's for stuff like
it's
that.
It's a good use, right? I guess it's a good use, right?
But the thing is that may lead to ongoing operational expenditures, especially something like the macro burst, where it took like 3 years to clean up.
Right.
Right.
Well, then that was a whole FEMA thing too, right?
So this is Steve. I don't know if Steve's actually watching this, but Steve, if you ever wind up seeing this, man, what the hell? Please talk to the legislature about what this is doing, because what this is doing is basically allowing for, if not outright encouraging, hiding certain expenditures that could easily be hidden. Whereas if that's not the case, then I would rather them just say, listen, we're going to have to spend like 5% more this year. Sell that to the voter.
The problem, I think, is that capital items, because they're large purchases, are the low-hanging fruit to withdraw from your budget.
Yep.
When you have other budgetary pressures that push the budget up.
Yep.
Right.
That's what he's talking about. Yep.
So if you have labor rates that are increasing at 3% year over year, and that's the majority of your budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
60% of your budget. That might actually reflect to a 4.5% increase in your right.
Yeah.
In your budget, year over year, right? Or do I have that backwards?
Well, I mean,
it would be a 2% increase baked in.
Here's the thing,
right?
Like
so if everything increases at the same rate,
with the ARPA funds, with the surplus spending, with the deferral to next year, with the addition to the contingency fund, this is the year to do it. This would be the year to say, all right, we're just going to issue the checks.
You don't get opportunities like this very often.
Yeah. So, like, this is the moment. This is the moment, right? Here, let me transition here. This is that moment where I'm saying, all right, Joe, I think I'm on board with this. Like, this should have just been a $5 million check to the taxpayers, right? Or $4.4 million check to the taxpayers, and put like $500,000 into an emergency fund or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to sell your budget. Right? Like, at worst, make this a referendum question so that we know we have consent of the governed.
Yeah.
Because
it's super important.
Yeah. Because, again, we can't just go on blind faith at this point. I don't think we can.
Not at all.
It's not to say I don't trust these people. It's not to say I don't have faith in these people, right? The people that I voted for last time around, if they run again, Joe, like, I think you and I are going to still be voting for them for the most part.
Yeah.
But, like, this is election losing stuff if this winds up not being reflected in the budget.
I think you're just opening up the door for attacks from the outside.
Yep.
But no matter how much you wave that flag, the things that happen are going to happen, and this is an opportunity for, the people who are, deciding on what items these are, right? And deciding on the appropriations to maybe, do what they feel is the right thing and buy down, capital items that aren't going to be reflected in the budget because of silly laws, right? So I can feel both sides, but the crux of the issue to me is that it's not going to to a vote. So.
Yeah. So Dan Donnelly says, what is Austin Shackelford's take on New Milford's latest happenings? And Mike Stengel. These are Austin was the former chair of the Libertarian Party of Litchfield County. Mike Stengel is the current chair. I don't know. We can talk about that at our next meeting, which I'll let you guys know about. It's going to be happening, I think, on the 26th of February. That'd be a Sunday. We always do it at the Abbey to support a local business, and that'll be at 2 p.m.
I heard their fish and chips are amazing.
I don't eat fish and chips.
You don't eat fish and chips?
So,
oh man,
I had chili there the other night. The chili's awesome.
I had one of the burgers. The burger was really good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
And I've had their
actually
fries. I remember their fries are really good.
Really good.
I don't usually get those type of like basic stuff.
Yeah.
I don't
know.
No. All right. So Mike Boucher, they are in the 5-year capital plans. Okay. So all of these expenditures are in the 5-year capital plan.
There you go.
Now we have an answer. Done.
It's amazing that never happened.
Right. Right. Like Mike, thank you so much that we got.
Jesus.
Yeah. Mike also says New Milford got $0 from the state or FEMA for the microburst.
We did get $0.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean, first of all, screw FEMA.
Yeah.
Like, never mind the microburst.
We were
Screw
talking
FEMA.
we were talking about Brookfield though.
But yeah, when it comes to Brookfield,
New
but yeah,
Milford, New Milford was
got nothing
outside
from the state. Yeah.
We're outside the zone.
Yeah, which is
They
ridiculous
threw a-
because the reason that we're outside the zone is because we're so huge in the area. That's it.
Is that what it was? I mean,
That's
because
all it is.
the lower part of New Milford, I guess, was
Got
in the zone
walloped.
because it got walloped.
Walloped. I mean, there's a reason we're rebuilding the roof at New Milford High School. Like
Right.
this whole fiasco at the Milford High School happened because of that
The
microburst
microburst,
in the end. Yeah. Or was it a macroburst? I forget what. All right, let's follow this up.
I'd have to calculate that.
2.5% of the annual budget.
And how much was the budget?
105 million?
105 minutes. So 2.5% would be how much?
Right, but don't forget, Joe, I mean, we're in the infancy of putting the budget together. All the numbers aren't in yet.
Right. And we're looking at how much? 4.4, right? Less
Well, again, Joe,
if we go less the tax rebate, we're at 2.696. Which is more than 2.5%, I would think.
Again, don't forget there are other variables within the budget, other pressures. I mean, we're not going to get the revenues that we have, so that's going to be a pressure. There's going to be pressures of negotiated salary increases.
Of course.
Okay,
And those things could all drive the budget up, right?
These are things that are beyond our control.
That could drive
that are going into the budget. That's going to be part of that
100%.
2.5%. And so if we can buy these things outside of the budget process without taxing the citizens, double taxing them, why not? What's the argument against that?
Because it's their money and they should get it back if they overspend.
1.7 of that 4.4 is going for tax relief,
100%.
Joe. So we're talking about 2.6 million approximately for capital expenditures.
Which, by the way, is 2.5%.
But if these were really
Yeah, Joe and I actually ran the math on this. Like,
It's-
that's like dead on
it's-
2.5.
Yeah, it's
Dead on.
Yeah, just about. I mean, like,
It worked out to like 2.74, and I think when we added everything up, it worked out to like 2.71.
yeah, something like that. But
Yeah.
it's 2.5%.
Yeah, it's dead on.
It's right, and the 1.7 million is the overpayment from the receivables, and he said that earlier in the meeting.
Yeah, which kind of is speaking to what we were talking about. How like this is.
But it's also illustrative of how government views the money, right?
Yeah.
The $1.7 million that was paid in excess by taxpayers, they're like, oh, well, we'll just give that back to them because that was their money, right? That'll get rolled forward in the budget. But this 2.6 that was done by government business, right, is government's money, and we're going to do what we can to spend it.
So real quick, Pat Erickson, the good thing we have Mike Boucher to clarify, the good thing we do have Mike Boucher to clarify, who also then went on to say, Mike Boucher, different county. Litchfield County didn't reach the FEMA threshold. Yes, that's because in Connecticut we don't have counties for all intents and purposes, and we're the only state that's like that. And
We don't have
FEMA
counties?
for all intents and purposes.
We have counties.
They're geographical references, and that's it, right?
Yeah,
so
there's no real government.
right, but with FEMA, the F in FEMA is federal,
Right,
so they do everything by county.
right.
And because we don't qualify as Fairfield County.
I would think that they would do it by like impact. Wouldn't that make so much more sense?
Well, it's odd is if that's the case, if that was the case with the microburst, with the state funding, that would be kind of effed up, right? Because the state knows that the counties don't matter.
right. And the state also knows where the impact was because they could send
Yeah.
people out here to look.
Yeah. So I thought as far as the state sending us no money was because, they looked at New Milford and they saw this little red dot at the very bottom and they were like, oh well, geez, you'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, that's way off topic. So let's just get back to what we're talking about here.
needs, if all of these things here were needs, would they or would they not be reflected in the budget? They would, right? I think we can all assume that they would.
Well, listen, I mean, there's the budget and then there's a 5-year capital budget. All right? Where they would show up in the 5-year capital budget, I couldn't say. Would some of these have been? Well, you heard from the director, Dan Calhoun, Parks and Rec. He would have put one of his items in next year's budget, and that's just one director, okay? There are other directors that, and typically, most of the capital requests come from Public Works. So.
Yeah, I mean, just the log trucks that were spoken about at the beginning.
Those are big ticket items.
You're looking at $435,000 for the chip truck, the chipper, and the grapple truck alone. I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's not small potatoes. And when you're looking at a rebate that would be to the normal taxpayer, a $200 rebate on their taxes, at 5%, that's a lot of money to some families. I mean, that's a Christmas present, that's a vacation, that's visiting relatives for a holiday.
You don't have to tell me these things, Joe. I mean,
the crux.
This is not my proposal, Joe.
Joe,
okay?
second of all, it's not, we are go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I was gonna say,
Before Mayor jumps in, I want folks at home to watch Walter O'Connor, right? Because he wants desperately to jump in. First things first, yeah, Pat Erickson, we need Paul Zemansky back on town council. Damn right.
I 100% agree.
100% agree. Paul's in this, he's not in this building right now, but his offices are in this building. Paul, if you're watching this video, come on. Help me, Obi-Wan. You're my only hope.
He'd get my vote.
He'd get my vote. Yeah, I loved Paul when he was on town council.
He was a way better what's the word? Interrogator? It's a bad word.
Yes.
But he was
Yes.
like what
That's a
I
good
was
word.
what I was
That's a good
trying
word.
to do. He was just
Yeah, you were engaging in an interrogatory.
he was exponentially better.
All right.
we also have to consider some other things too, right? So 5-year capital.
Hang on, actually, real quick. I meant to say, watch Walter O'Connor throughout the rest of this video because he's like antsy. He's like fidgeting. He's like trying to get it. You can't see his face behind his mask, which is unfortunate. But it's like why Walter? Like why is he wanting to jump in?
I think because the line of questioning and the direction the conversation was going, just isn't what the Board of Finance normally sees. I think that's that's my feeling.
Plan for those that have been in business or are in business, that's a moving and a fluid document. For instance, you had Sean Emmons from Emmons Tree just tell you why the need for the grapple truck and the chip truck. Reason being, it's more efficient, like the pothole machine, right? And over time, it will pay for itself.
Which
But
should be
these
reflected in the
particular costs,
budget.
too, you also have to take into account, as when I was telling the town council, is your inflationary pressures. Okay? So some of the stuff that you'd be looking at purchasing today may be 10, 15, 20% higher in the summertime. Is that fair to the taxpayer? When you have the cash
Ask
in
them.
hand right now? I
Ask
don't
him.
think so. On top of that, a lot of these funds, right, were done by a couple things. One, additional revenue, where you had conveyance fees, because we have a strong real estate here in New Milford. Good news, right? Also, the bond premium, right? These are all funds that weren't derived from the taxpayer, but were derived from services. Let's put that money to work. The
Okay.
$1.7 million was the increase in taxes to the public. We're stabilizing and doing a tax refund, so to speak, with that 1.7. So that puts that at par, so to speak. So to me, the most prudent thing, as I suggested to the town council, was do these capital items that are needed by our departments so that we can be efficient. For instance, the fire department, right? They approached me. For instance, you have all the fire departments here, and one I'll just say right now, right? An additional $50,000 I asked for, because they'll tell you that the equipment has gone up tremendously. And if we don't do it today, it's gonna be up even more. I mean, Chief Harris will tell you that.
Well, but that's $50,000 as an inflationary adjustment for future fire vehicles.
Correct.
That $50,000 isn't going directly to an item. That's going into an account for future spending.
But they already have in their revolving
Seems
equipment
right?
that they already have, that we see each and every year, they already have that. What they're telling me is, that, okay, Chief, can I defer to the chief, Mr. Chair?
Alan Harris, Fire Chief, Northville. Every year we do a capital budget. And previous year, the mayor needed to cut some money, so we requested 300. We ended up getting 270. It threw the fund off because, again, we project out every year. We've had, again, everybody's seen it in every modality, rampant inflation, okay? The fire equipment has gone up significantly, percentages we've never seen. And we requested the additional 30 back, and because of the inflationary spiral, the mayor said he would try to get us 50. Again, this year we have our request in as well already, and hopefully it doesn't get cut during the deliberations.
Our last truck was 386. To replace that truck today is about almost 500,000. That was a year ago. Just to give you guys the heads up. That's what we're dealing with the capital.
And then Joe, future forecasting, not to mix apples and oranges. But here's some of the headwinds we're gonna face for next year's budget, which is why I suggest we purchase one-time capital with this money. Let's take two items. I'll take the health insurance costs by both the town and the Board of Education. The numbers that we got from our consultant is a 10% increase. On $12 million, that's a $1.2 million escalation off of one item next year, in next year's budget.
Renegotiate.
Okay? That's number one.
Some of it you can't.
Am I correct?
You're correct. That,
In a second.
you have pension costs too.
The next one is the pension. Due to the fact that they take a long-term strategic view, our pension has had a significant, because we do they call it a 60-40 investment, which is good over time, but we show, we showed a loss in our pension, which is going to equate to about how much approximately?
Approximately $500,000 more in the contribution in our ARC. So those two alone, that's $1.7 million increase starting off.
Just in two items.
Okay, so we got to deal with other things besides capital requests, salary increases. I mean, we don't have all the information, but those two things we know.
But that's
other
why-
things I know about, I don't want to make public at this point. It's not.
That's why, right? That's why I'm trying to find out, right? My whole goal is to get to the bottom of whether these are wants or needs, right? And to figure out, right? Maybe it's best if we wait and see what our budget looks like before we decide to start spending out of, what really is, unrealized surplus at this point, right? Because the budget cycle isn't over. We could be hit with a bad winter storm that incurs massive amounts of damage, or there's any of a number of things that could fire.
What was that?
I said that was in December. It's like
Yeah,
now we
yeah.
haven't had a winter.
Yeah, now that there is no winter in 2023, now that my plow truck is doing nothing.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that, man.
Yeah, man.
Like, I would have
Spent all that money last winter. And,
the one storm we had, my snowblower wouldn't start.
yeah.
Yeah, it was terrible. I would have
Yeah.
called you.
Well, it was only like 2.5 inches, so
I
you
know.
probably could have just sent the boy out and said, "Go shovel."
What? My wife actually did half of it.
Really?
Yeah, no, she's a trooper, man.
Yeah.
So I was actually scrolling on my phone. I'm sorry. I'm trying to find. I can't find the line in here.
Okay, did you hear everything that just took place there? Because it sounded like what they were building towards is the exact thing that you and I are worried about, which is, okay, well, we've got all of these expenses that we're going to have to incur for next year.
Right. Which is kind of my whole point.
Right. So, again, it's building towards the exact thing that we were trying to protect against by having this thing go to a referendum.
Yes.
At the very least.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if not, just issue the checks and then, sell your budget. Sell it. But by the way, I don't know what the CPI. Can you look up the CPI in your phone? Well, actually, I have my laptop.
Well,
right
what
here.
I was actually looking for is the extra budgetary. You can only spend so much money off budget.
Well, the point is
But
that
that's kind of
that you could go by the
CPI.
CPI instead, which is issued by the U.S. Treasury. I think has the CPI, or is it the budget? Or is it the budgetary? I forget. There's some federal office that the state is
Bureau of
allowed.
Labor and Statistics, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, BLS.
Okay. So what? So while
know
he's
about
looking
those.
that up, it's first things first. The real number, whatever the real number is, I don't know what they're going to give, but the real number, as I don my libertarian hat here, the real number is going to be way more than 2.5%.
Way higher. Way higher
Way
than
more.
2.5%.
Or we had like 10 consecutive months of basic, not quite, but very close to double-digit inflation.
Yeah.
There's no way it's 2.5%. So this isn't me like encouraging our elected officials to say, all right, screw it. Instead of 2.5%, because we know we can get away with 7. Let's go with 5.
They're saying 6.5%.
6.5%. So the real number for this year could be 6.5%, which means that you could be
Hit with a 6.5% tax increase.
yeah. Which
This is a terrible year, by the way, to have budget negotiations for with any labor organization, because they're going to say, hey, the rate of inflation was 10%.
yeah.
And that's going to be their starting point.
Yep, and they won't budge.
And they're not going to want to budge because they're protecting their the people that they're working for. You know?
Well, here's the thing, though, right? Like, it's one thing to say we're going to have a 5% increase in the budget,
Last year was 4 point something, 4.3 or something like that.
and it's another thing to say we're going to sell this to the voters and they're going to vote for it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And since this seems to me like we started the show off by explaining that $1.7 million should not be treated as an excuse to then just build another $1.7 million on top of that previous 1.7. It's really $3.4 million.
Right.
It shouldn't be treated as an excuse to go $3.4 million up.
By pushing.
But it sounds
By
like
pushing
every
that one-
argument that they're presenting in favor of doing things the way that they're doing in this meeting, right, is building towards we're looking at taking that $1.7 million and not giving it back to the taxpayers directly with a check,
Right.
but
Deciding what they think is best for it.
basically, like, to put it in the worst possible light. I mean, yeah, but
But to your point, or to try to illustrate your point, right? So what you're saying is that they're taking the $1.7 million, right? And they're pushing that forward into the next year's budget, right?
Yep.
And then they're saying, oh, well, we also have to have a little bit of an increase in our budget, right? So it goes up another $1.7 million. But your tax bill is only going up by, only a little bit, because it's just that little bit of icing that we put on top of the cake.
which is
when in
cool.
reality, it's the
it
icing.
could go down. It should really be in that circumstance, in that hypothetical circumstance.
Right.
It should be going down.
It should go down. It should go down.
And by the way, what a great pitch to people looking to move into the area. What a great pitch to be able to say, we lowered the taxes in this town.
I've said for years we should abolish the car tax as a town. Just abolish. I don't think we could actually do that. I think it's issued by the
Time out. Could we do it?
I don't think so. I think it's a state law. It would be like abolishing the Board of Ed.
Well, no, I'm not saying from a legal standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint, which we should be allowed to do because we're a town and we decide our taxes.
I mean, I think we should be able to.
Right. But
I hate the car tax.
I hate the car tax too. But the point is, most people, when they're paying car taxes, aren't paying anything close to what the property tax on their home is, number one. And number two, like, KC pays millions in taxes. So, like, what percentage of the actual collections are those car taxes? And could we actually afford to just absorb that if we do, like I said, like we've been suggesting, and build a ridiculously tight budget?
I think the last time I checked, which was, I don't know how many years ago, 6 years ago now, I think it was like around 8 or 9%, maybe 7% of our overall grand list was vehicles. I think. And don't quote me on that. I could be wildly off, but that's what I recall.
Like,
you know what? I will find out.
Property taxes are not the only source of revenue in this town.
No, and actually, I think pretty perfectly illustrated by what Pete was saying. New Milford's a pretty desirable place to be, and our grand list growth was a lot of it not that, right? A lot of it was business growth, And the best way to offset taxpayers' contribution is through business growth.
Yep.
By creating some sort of an industrial base like a Kimberly-Clark.
A supply side.
That has a massive amount of equipment, because these businesses, every time you walk into a mom and pop shop, look around at their store and realize that every little thing from their pencils to their lawn chairs to their desks to their computer monitors to the doorbell.
Well, they're not going to declare the pencils, but your
supplies are supposed to show up on your supplies are supposed to show up on your business.
Nobody's
desk.
declaring the pencils.
Well,
Sorry, but
I'm stupid then.
Nobody declares pencils. Come on, Joe. But like the point is, if you ever go to Taylor's, the shelves are part of their declaration. They have to declare
everything.
That.
It's
right?
crazy.
The computers, they have to declare that. The network thing in the back, the server.
The server.
They have to declare that. The office furniture, it has to be declared.
And every time you upgrade it, your taxes go up.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh man, my business, I'm going to reinvest in my business. I'm going to buy that
Bruzy.
64-inch deck lawnmower. And then you have to think about it and you go, hey man, that's a $10,000 purchase.
Well, I'm 15, but sure.
15,000, whatever. Yeah. I'm going to have to pay $450 every year on that while it's in service for the rest of its life.
Well, yeah, that's just it though. Like Chris Bruzy is building that huge he's building, congratulations, Chris. I love the fact that you're building here in New Milford. I love the fact that you've got your own facility that you're building. That's cool. I wish my landscaping company was in that place, right? But all of that lawnmower equipment, the lawnmowers, the leaf blowers, the trailers, the trucks, all of that. He's paying taxes on all of that.
Every single bit.
Yeah. And not just the property in the building.
Right. And it has to do with the town that you leave and return to every day, right? That's why your car tax is supposed to be attached to your home.
So Lisa Agee says, I heard a number today that said the average family is spending $9,500 over last year just to tread water and stay the same. Jesus. If that's true, good Lord. Good Lord. Because the average family here in Connecticut, I think the household income is what, like 70-ish?
I think New Milford's like 35.
Household? No.
No?
That's individual.
That's individual?
Yeah, household is like 65-ish. I think it's like 65-ish in New Milford or something. Dude, that's like a 17% increase one year over the other.
That's crazy.
Right? So
eggs are like what, $5 a dozen now, something like that?
It used to be like $1. I used to not even think about buying eggs when I went to the grocery store.
It's crazy.
I know, so she continues, I know that is a statistical load of crap, but it feels close. Well, yeah, I mean, this is what I kind of alluded to. Like, the CPI is not the real inflation.
Yeah.
Right? It always underestimates inflation.
Right. Well, is she saying that is it high? Because you could read that as if it's too low. Or
Oh, here's a good question from Pat. Joe, how much of a check are you suggesting should go back to the taxpayers from this money?
Whatever their proportion of the grand list is. So, I mean, it would have to go back the same way that it came in. They'd have to say, oh, we have X number of. So it wouldn't be a huge check. I mean, it's not going to be, you know what? It's not going to be the $95, what was it? $95?
$9,500, yeah.
It's not going to be anywhere close to that. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but, we have, 20,000 plus taxpayers in the town.
Well, I mean, it might be a ton for something like KC, right? And that might be a job.
Right.
That might be like somebody getting a job at KC.
Or an investment in another piece of machinery that is going to turn into another tax increase or whatever it is. I mean, whichever way they decide to spend the money, in my opinion, like the net benefit outweighs.
Well, yeah, and that's just it. And everything that we're talking about, like, again, if we're wrong, we're wrong, right? If you guys vote, right, when it comes time for the budget, if you guys vote a certain way, let's say it's 95-5, but who cares if it's 95? If it could be 51-49, you take the L.
Yeah.
We take the L.
Yeah, yeah. No,
but that's just it. We don't care so much about the final decision as the fact that it's happening at a referendum.
Mike, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. The more I watch this video, the more I realize how little homework I did before I got there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, I like you would assume that I would know what's in the 5-year capital plan, and to be honest with you, I didn't know. That's why I was asking the question at the meeting, right? And I'm just trying to do my due diligence, I should probably have, like, as I was sitting here scrolling on my phone, I was actually looking up was something that I was actually involved in the charter revision, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but there's a cap on extra budgetary spending that the town has that's related to the mill rate and the grand list, right?
Yep. 3 point something percent.
Well, it has to do with the
like
percentage of a mill.
Yeah.
Right. There's a certain percentage. It's 1/8 or 1/16 or a quarter of a mill.
Oh,
I forget what it is. Right.
Yeah.
And it's after a certain threshold, it has to go to a town vote, and then after you know what I mean. After a certain threshold, it has to go to a referendum.
Well, that's just it though. Like, they're under the threshold for the referendum because the referendum threshold was like 3%, and it's just not happening.
Right.
Because you're not really talking about. Well, I guess the deferral would be something that you would included that percentage.
I just feel like I should know what it is.
Yeah.
That was my point. Is
Yeah.
I feel like I should know, and I probably didn't do enough homework. And you know what? I mean, again, like a lot of people might look at this and go, you know what? This is really a great idea. I think that we should be spending this because it is extra budgetary funds. The town did its job. It made some extra money. It should be able to spend it on things that are going to end up in the budget in coming years. But I just want to make sure as a member of the Board of Finance that it's reflected in the budget in the coming years and that you're not just filling a hole that's going to be backfilled with the next thing.
Okay, one last question here before we get back to the video from Pat. I wish that there were more questions asked of the Board of Ed. Our town budget is scrutinized. Why aren't the schools? So I want to be clear that this conversation is about the entire thing. So this conversation that we're having today does include an effect directly. Actually, the Board of Ed more than it affects the municipal side of the budget.
I want you to play the part of the video with the $100,000 for the Board of Ed, because that was also an interesting one. Because you know what? Yes, a lot of questions should be asked of the Board of Ed. Like, why would you move into another building without a plan as to how you're going to renovate that building that has been approved and funded, right? As opposed to fixing the building that you're currently in. Like, to me, that was a major sticking point for that particular part of the vote. Now, I don't think that they did anything necessarily wrong by moving out of a building that didn't have heat, right? But I find it hard to believe that no one knew that that building was not going to have heat, right? With the number of problems that it had, and that there weren't things done to.
Well, I mean, they've
right?
been planning on moving to Sennello for a few years. So
Yeah.
it
was supposed to be a
in
$4
response
million
to
expenditure.
Pat's question, though, my take is incredibly cynical, and I don't know if I want to actually say it out loud in
Well,
public.
what's the question?
Our town budget is scrutinized. Why aren't the schools? So my super cynical take is because I think that if you actually dug down into this and really scrutinized and really did your homework, we've had, what was it, a 33% reduction in enrollment since peak, and it's, again, the trend is downward. That's what the research that they said. And by the way, that estimate so far seems to be projecting high, as in it seems to be that their median projection is probably high, and that we should probably be going by their lower projection because they were supposed to be a baby boom because of COVID, and it didn't happen.
No. Although I am seeing a lot more of, I mean, maybe it's my age group too. I'm not seeing a lot more of people.
Well, I mean, your
but I know my
anecdotes
wife
are
knows
wonderful,
having
but
kids.
the way the data bears it out is that it didn't happen. So I think the reason that their scrutiny doesn't happen is because if you actually did it, instead of $71 million, you could probably do it for 55
I mean,
and get the same product.
I don't think that you're wrong. And I actually did ask a lot of questions of the Board of Ed, at the last set of budget hearings. And one of them was pointing to exactly what you're talking about, which is that if you look at it year over year over year, our spending per pupil has gone up inordinately.
It's well exceeded CPI.
Right. And it's well exceeded CPI. It's rate of inflation, whichever way you want to look at it. And
I
every year
always
they
say CPI because the CPI is always underestimating inflation.
And every year they say they need more money, and it's not enough money, and they always need more money. And
here's the thing, Joe.
And I have kids in the schools. I want my kids to get a good education.
And here's the thing. I'm going to offer a ridiculously hot take. So, I don't care how hot it is. I think if the total budgeted amount reflected the fact that we have 33%, the kids have to be the variable expenditure, right? They have to be the thing motivating the variable expenses, right? They have to be. What the hell else would be the variable expenditures, right? So when it comes to the fixed expenditures, that would be mostly the buildings, right?
No, buildings and administration, because
Well, no, hold on. Hear this out. Hear this out. You shut down an entire school. Mm-hmm. This isn't New York City public school systems where there's like 500 schools. Mm-hmm. There were only a handful of schools. You shut down an entire school in direct response to the fact that we've had such a decline in enrollment.
Right, 2015. And
we've had a decline in enrollment. So somehow the budget has gone up like 27% since. If instead we were to go down to say like 55 million, if we had a year where we said screw it, we're subtracting like 15 million and we're still going to provide that product, I think you would never have the pushback year to year that the Board of Ed gets moving forward. I think you'd get none of the pushback. I think that the Board of Ed side of the budget would pass by a greater margin than the municipal side of the budget, which has never happened. Never. Except for 1 year when the Board of Ed went way out of their way in 2000, I think it was 3, to get out the vote, if you will. And the margin barely exceeded the margin for the municipal side of the budget. So, honest to God, hot take, I think that's why you don't, I don't think you get the scrutiny. Lisa, I feel like my household expenses are up at least $1,000 a month.
At least.
I feel it.
At least. I mean, yeah,
I went out and bought like some basic bitch groceries the other day.
Yeah.
And it was like $130. I'm like, I'm a single dude.
Yeah.
Do you know what my standard is for food when you're a single dude?
It's ramen noodles and
It's
Pepsi.
It's like, okay, I'll be happy to microwave some beans.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a can of beans.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not cooking steaks. I'm not cooking
You
fancy
should.
dinners. You know?
When you got kids, man, you can't afford that stuff anymore.
Well, that's just it. But the kids will only eat what the kids will eat. You know what I'm saying?
My kids eat quite. I don't know. Whatever.
Whatever.
That's a whole other argument.
Yeah. But
Back to
yeah,
the kids.
no, Lisa, we
I
definitely
feel
agree with it. We're feeling it.
But just to touch on your point, right? Like we have some other pressures with the Board of Education that I think are extraneous, where you can't apply, the same amount that you'd pay a teacher in Tennessee to Connecticut, right?
Yep.
And a lot of it has to do with these baked in things that have to do with an overall increase in tax rates year after year after year after year after year, because every tax rate gets filtered through the economy. It's not just the 2%. That 2%, like I said, gets applied to the businesses. That business owner also has a house and he's got a car, and all those things are getting taxed at that rate. And so do their employees. So their employee wages have to go up.
The Laffer curve.
Yeah, and it always puts this upward pressure on there. I think that, I don't know. We do need someone to really dig into the Board of Ed, though.
Yeah, this is a project I wanted to work on with Joe. We talked about it. Like really digging into it and seeing where it could be. And it's gonna take somebody spending. It's gonna take a team of people, at least 2 people, really spending time on it, months.
Months, and then digging into it and trying to find out where are the areas for efficiency.
Well, I mean, one of the things that stands out to me like a sore thumb is that the student to teacher ratio is significantly down from even when I was in high school. Significantly down.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with 25 kids in a classroom. There's nothing wrong with that. All of the data suggests, all of it, all of it, suggests that when it comes to the student to teacher ratios, they really don't matter, right? Like the number of kids in the classroom really doesn't matter that much.
Did they have mixed classes when you were a kid?
In what way?
Like did they have
boys and girls?
No, not boys and girls.
How old are you, Joe?
What about ability level?
Well, that's just it. Like that's
Right.
another thing
So
that no public school will ever allow because of the unions. But you're right.
I mean,
I'll give a perfect example. When I was in second grade, there were 5 classes at Hill and Plain School for second grade, and what the data suggests is that you have one that's like an advanced and accelerated class.
Right.
3 that are normies, if you will,
Right.
and 1 that's something of a remedial class. And then the daytime kids, you got to pull them out and institutionalize them because we can't. They just nuke classroom.
Right.
Excuse my language. Sorry, folks.
But I think we've had a lot more integration, right? So when you have a higher level of integration, right, what you end up with is you have, I think, and I'm not a teacher, but just looking at a group of kids, right, is as kids become disengaged, whichever side of that curve that they're on, right? Like if you have a kid who's really smart and they're not being engaged, or you have a kid who's not keeping up, so they're not engaged, right?
Yep.
They tend to be more disruptive.
Yep.
Right? And
That was me.
Right, that was me too. That's why I'll admit it. I was a
Right,
terrible
I was a
student.
straight A student, and then I was in this super duper accelerated program. It was super experimental. There were only 6 kids in the entire school system that were in the program, and I was one of them. And then when they canceled that program, I went back into math that was like 3 years behind what I was working on.
So a similar thing happened to me. Not quite exactly the same, but similar. And you end up falling behind because you're bored, right?
Yeah.
But at that level, then all of a sudden you have this disruption in the classroom because you've integrated the classroom, and the kids that aren't being engaged are destroying any semblance of order that you have. And then you need to break the classes up into smaller numbers.
Yep.
So that they're more easily managed and you can keep
I
on
see
top of
what
the
you're
kids.
so-
Now that's just a guess that I'm making, right? But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Let's see. Okay, we're gonna get back to this video in a second here, folks. We gotta get through this.
Yeah.
All right, Ray. Good evening, gentlemen. Hey, Ray. Thanks for tuning in. Our show is most regular. Ray says to vote no. Well, I mean, he says vote no. Simple decision. Ray, I know for a fact you can attend the town meeting. I know for a fact at 6 o'clock on Monday you're going to be available. Go. If you guys are adamant about any of these positions, either in favor or against, that's what the town meeting is for. I don't care so much how you guys vote. I just want, since it's going to be a town meeting and there's no way to avoid it.
Let's see if we can get more than 100 people.
Let's see if we can get 100 people to show up. Yeah. Again, if you and I are the only ones that vote no, so be it.
Yeah.
So be it.
I mean, hey.
Right. All right. Lisa Agee. Rini Mastrella, excuse me. Chicken in some places has increased by 50 to 100% in the past year. So
that's crazy.
Jesus. And what happened with the eggs? Well, I don't think Joe and I are allowed to say what we think about the eggs because we're on YouTube and Facebook.
Didn't they cull a whole bunch of chickens?
They culled a crap load of chickens, and there's more to it than that, but they did that.
Wasn't it bird flu?
That's what they're saying.
That's what they're saying. I don't know.
Yeah. And,
avian flu?
Yeah. Again, Joe, like, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook. I don't want to get into my actual thoughts on the matter too much.
They won't kick us off.
Mike Batcher, we did it in our day. Mike, this is from Pat Erickson. Mike, they had 100% inclusive in our schools now. I don't know what that means. It would be beyond difficult for a teacher to have a class of 25. Yeah. I think what she's getting at, if I'm to steelman her take, is what you were saying, that the more kids you have in the classroom, the higher likelihood you are to have, that
disruptive entities.
Well, again, somebody who's can use the bell curve, you're more likely to have the extremes, and because of the extremes ruin everything for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to put the extremes together. Right. So
that
and
was.
By the way, the teachers' unions will never go for that.
They'll
never go for that system.
I don't know.
Where if you have a second grade where there's 5 classes, you put one that's accelerated, 3 normies, 1 remedial, and then pull the severely handicapped out.
I think after a certain, I don't know. We'll have
to send them to Southborough.
I think we've done a show on the school stuff, didn't we?
I don't remember.
I thought we did one a couple of years ago.
Anyways, let's get back to the $5 million surplus.
For the school, right? I mean, we saw that recently. Maybe the more prudent approach is waiting and putting it to an actual referendum vote, right? Where the taxpayers can decide if they'd like to offset some of those expenses with these funds versus.
This money was already approved back in June when we were talking about the surplus, that it would go to capital reserve regardless.
So?
Regardless.
And then what?
This is the plan to spend the money. That money's going to capital reserve regardless. You voted on it, the council voted on it, it was approved, so it's going there. It's just, what are you gonna do with it? That's what this is. It's a plan, what you're gonna do with the money. It's going
and
there.
That's what we've been getting at.
It's not
I'm discussing what to do with it.
It's going there or not, it's whether or not.
All right, look at the body language of
the plan.
Right?
That's what it is.
And there's 3 steps to approving the plan. Mayor bring it to the council approves, we approve, and then it goes to the town for the final approval. This is, monies that were already approved budget-wise, surplus-wise, extra income that was over and above.
I think this
the
part of the
budget.
conversation is them saying, Joe, you're doing this too late.
It makes fiscal, financial sense.
Really, that's what it sounds like to me. He's like, hey, we've already done this. We're going to move the money, right? We're going to move the money. Here's the process. All we can do is vote yes. And if that's the case, then what's the point of the vote at all?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of feel like there should be some sort of input in here,
Walter has done this a few times now with the Board of Finance. Like, it has basically implied to you that there is no vote. That, like, if the only option is to vote yes, then there is no vote.
I think that is the strongest argument for why the Board of Finance needs light item control of the budget.
Yep.
Because otherwise, then what's the point, right? I mean, we are. I feel like at times a vestigial organ, where we serve a purpose, but some of the times we're not really necessary.
This is the one and only place where Gail was right? Where if the the Board of Finance is going to be just this rubber stamping body, what's the point?
Right.
Yeah.
Waiting and putting it into an operational budget where you have to meet the 2.5% cap, and we're almost at 2.5% with just the health insurance and the pension increase, not counting the fact that we had 5 union negotiations over the last summer that's going to kick into the budget next year too.
And what impact is that going to have on the budget?
It's going to increase it.
Yeah, this is going to be a very extremely difficult budget.
So from a taxpayer standpoint, spending this money is not going to affect
it's going to capital reserve regardless, Joe. Regardless. The motion's already made.
That's not the question you
It's
asked.
just a
though.
matter of moving the money and booking the entry. It's not a matter of if it's going. It is going. It's a matter of, do you want to spend it on this particular plan or not? It's going.
But we don't get to go through and say this is appropriate, this is.
You can't cherry pick.
It's not cherry picking.
No.
Plus the fact we don't have line.
We don't have line item
I think even
control,
Joe
so-
is agreeing you with you there.
Walter Barry, you had a question?
Yeah, real quick. Let's see if you guys can see my cursor. Yeah, you should be. So right here is Diane Clafe. That's Joe. That's Joe Troiano. And we're gonna move over to Barbara Wolf. And but it looks like Joe Troiano is almost there with you. Almost sees what you're saying. So interesting.
He's had my back a couple of times, and actually so has Diane. Believe it or not, it's she's had my back on a couple of things, which is nice.
Or Barbara?
I'm going to defer to
Okay, Barbara.
Barbara, please.
To clarify, we're just reaching consensus here this evening for this. This is not a vote to
move forward
approve
to a town
or not,
vote,
and
yeah.
that's going to be contingent on a town meeting. Can you hear me through the mask? Or?
Yes.
Okay, it's going to be contingent on a town meeting and also subject to audit, right?
Yes, all of this above.
The audit, these numbers are good numbers.
Yeah, the auditors.
The numbers are good numbers.
I agree with Joe that I'd love to see a little more go back in the form of tax relief, but I did have a couple of questions on some of the items. The light talking about on the Youngsfield intersection, those are not traffic lights, those are lights, not
Mr. Mayor?
So Barbara,
crosswalk lighting,
Yes.
not traffic, red light, green light.
correct, so that's
Okay.
where the crosswalk is, that's very dimly lit. Light that up because
Okay.
a lot of pedestrians are.
I wasn't clear on that when I was looking at the thing. And the other thing is, I saw there was money put aside for the cartograph software. Isn't that typically leased, not purchased these days?
We actually have the cartograph software that DPW has. We're actually expanding that to our park and rec team. And this is to buy the seats, so to speak, for the additional people that will be using cartograph.
So then you're gonna have to also incur some training costs because you can't just jump into
The
that.
training, Mike
Training.
Boucher, who does that, is gonna help with the training.
And the licenses,
do you
the
care
data
about any of this
entry,
stuff?
because usually you get hit with that at the end and it's a complete
That's actually
surprise.
She's
included in
going
that
through.
cost.
I'm
Okay.
trying to find.
And
I just
these are
found it out. It's
PDF
1/8 of 1
that-
mil. I just found in the charter.
Whatever a
I'm
mill
checking
works
my phone.
out to.
But it's of the grand list, so it's
Yeah.
not a mill on.
Yeah,
I could
you
back into a victory
We'd
on
have
that.
to pull out a calculator to figure
Right.
that out.
But it's and 1/2 of 1 mil. All right, so it's any an appropriation supplemental to the total annual budget, which is in excess of 1/8 of 1 mil of the last completed grand list of the town, or any supplemental appropriation if the cumulative total of the supplemental appropriation for the current fiscal year exceeds 1/2 of 1 mil.
So in short, for layman's terms out there, like this is not even close.
Well, no, I think it's like it's probably like, I don't know, 300,000 and like 2 million or
Times
something
however.
like that.
Yeah. But it's of the grand list. The grand list is way more than 100 million.
Yeah, it's way more.
Yeah.
I don't have the grand list on my phone.
But anyways, these questions that Barbara's asking are kind of like really specific. Do we care? Do you want to go 1.5 speed?
Yeah, go 1.5 speed or
All right,
double.
let's go 1.5.
She's just going through the various appropriations to, to kind of
Yeah, she's just grilling the actual appropriations themselves. Yeah. Which you and I care less about than the actual principle behind the thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of these things are great. The stuff that we need, max roof, right? I mean, I could go through the whole thing, and maybe you could post it to the.
Yeah, we don't need to go through every single item.
More AEDs.
It's 3 pages, right?
It's 2 pages, but
pages,
it's double
right.
spaced. It's not that.
Whatever.
You'll be able to look at
EV
each other's
charging.
protected
station
documents.
So
And
what
they'll
it
be in a
is-
usable form once they're.
Yeah, so what it is, what cartograph is for instance, when you're doing a job function, so say they're doing drainage on West Meeting
I
House
love
Road.
watching people at
So what
1.5
happens is the
speed.
person pulls up to the job site, take a picture before and a picture after, and then what they'll do is they'll connotate the
imagine
notes
if
what they're
Pete
doing.
actually
and it
talked
also
like this?
projects the costs of both the
Town council
material
meetings go.
and
Yeah,
of
dude, it'd be so fast.
the actual labor, which is really needed, and we learned that when we had.
I think this
first
is still
microburst
slower than
back in
Ben
the southern part of
Shapiro.
Milford, when we're trying to get FEMA funding.
We could pull him up.
You need to be very specific in what your costs are. So this would be very helpful to us in case we have incidents such as that, and to plan for the directors when they're looking at their budgetary processes.
But they will be readable between the departments?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see.
Good.
I was curious as to why the gravel truck and the chip truck and the dump trucks and a couple of other vehicles here that we have for park and rec, why are we not leasing those? Why are we buying them instead of leasing them? Is there any advantage?
Yes.
We just talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah,
Or was that
we
off
did.
camera?
It was off camera.
That was off camera.
And interest
We did.
costs,
Yeah.
if we buy them outright, we don't have to pay the additional interest costs. So
Yeah, so let's just say this. Like, I know it's an aside, but folks at home, don't lease.
Yeah, no.
Don't ever lease a car or a truck.
No. But buy as many tangible goods as you can. It's-
Buy as many eggs as you can.
right, chickens too.
Buy as many chickens as you can.
Hey, chickens make eggs. This is like a money-making thing.
Oh my God! It's like the golden goose.
I think it was too many poultry analogies.
Yeah, right.
This turkey's flown the coop.
Oh Jesus!
So
Joe.
to the taxpayer, it's a better deal.
And they're typically leased to own anyways.
Yeah, and then we could sell them at the end of their, I mean, in
like-
theory. I know, we talk about that all the
It's basically
time.
about the cost of money. So,
Yeah.
with interest rates rising, it makes more sense to purchase them outright.
And I had a concern also about this tire balancing machine and the liability involved with that. I would assume there's an advantage to taking these vehicles for the balancing where they have been going right along. As opposed to, because I know that if you're trying to do a passenger car as opposed to a double hub, it's a little more dangerous than what you might think. And in my mind, I'm thinking maybe the people who do this all the time, there's every
I mean, the
advantage
more I think
to
about
continuing,
this, the more
based
I
on my
feel
own
like
knowledge, of course.
I would
Would be
so
another
much
way.
rather
It
see
seemed to me there was a-
this money spent on one large capital project.
One big ass.
Yeah, I mean, like we got $2.6 million. What mileage can we get for the town and the kids and the ball fields or another park,
the
or
general,
part of the bike trail?
The general rule of thumb when that's the case is unless you're talking about something that has a ridiculously massive ROI as far as a capital investment is concerned, you're better off spending it on smaller things.
Yeah, I mean,
that's just the rule of thumb generally.
I understand, but just so many of these things are going to end up in the budget anyway.
Yeah. Well, anyways,
There was a
We're
little
just
bit
about
more
done.
liability involved in the tire balancing than I'd like, but.
Go ahead.
We don't balance the large tires, the truck tires. We only balance more, we have a large fleet of vehicles, four-wheel vehicles, basically, that's what that's for. It's not for the large trucks.
So
They
is-
use that the old-fashioned way with a level and
Yeah.
an air raid, a big truck.
Thank you. I thought I had one more thing here. I see we're putting money toward the max roof. Are we putting anything toward Pennybone's roof, or
We already put money aside for that.
don't we need more though?
We're doing a full assessment on that, Barbara. That's gonna be substantial funds.
You wanna talk about
Jack and his team
Pettibone?
are coming up with a true
All
cost.
for the entire
to bring
rest of the
Pettibone
night?
to Compliance, and that will more than likely have to be some bonded.
We could talk about Scott
doing that
Chamberlain
type
and
of-
Gronbach
doing
too
that
while
type
we're
of-
at it.
oh my God.
Oh my God. He was on to something.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to the East Street inspection. Is that being inspected for a reason?
Jack?
We're gonna have the building inspected after the schools moved out, we want to have them, the architect only.
God, Jack, it's always so hard to get in the mics.
The condition of the building, the roof, from the roof down, the condition of the building, the moisture content, and the hazardous materials that are there, and come up with a report that gives us a snapshot of the condition of the
These
building.
guys really know their stuff, though.
Was that, you mentioned that the boiler is cracked. Is that kind of the function of the reason for this?
Well, the building is going to be, is being vacated, and, there's discussion about whether who's going to keep the building, how we're gonna maintain it. And so the best thing is to start by saying, what's the existing condition of the building?
Okay, that makes sense, yeah, okay, thank you.
Walter, do you have a question? No? Joe or Joe Triano?
What's the kayak program?
Thank you. Laura Murphy, who's currently our Park and Events Director. One of the things we're talking about is to continue additional programs. There'll be more outside. One thing we've learned, especially during the pandemic, is to get more people outside, more people exercise. Also continue with our expansion of tourism here in New Milford. So this would be a kayak program that Park and Rec would run. You'd have people take kayak rides up the Housatonic, also on Lindeming. It would be a charged
Who is
program.
that in the background?
It would be
She
kind
looks
of
like a
return on
reporter.
investment. It would be an expansion of things to do, bring people
I
to New
don't know.
Milford. And obviously, if they're
Did
here
someone
doing that
report
type of
on
thing,
this?
they're going to be eating in New Milford.
She's on her phone. You can
They'll
see
be
it
buying
in the-
gas in
yeah.
New Milford. So it's just kind of an expansion on the tourism segment of New Milford.
So to clarify, that could be a self-sustaining program?
We're hoping that it is.
Any other questions on this thing? Okay, I'll take it to the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
So
Joe,
Barbara
Diane,
and Joe were opposed.
Okay, all right.
Thank
So
you,
just
Barbara.
Joe DeGorio is now.
And Barbara.
Oh, you did, I'm sorry, Barbara, okay.
All right, so I think that basically covers the entire topic, really, right?
Yeah, that's
Like we don't need to go into the stuff that that was off topic beforehand. But I hope you guys
we
have
could do the
at
Board of
least
Ed
understand.
appropriation for
It's 8 o'clock.
$100,000 where they.
It's 9 o'clock, man. Let's call it.
All right.
But like, I hope everybody at home understands the point we're making here. It's not that we're necessarily opposed to these expenditures themselves, but we don't like the process here. We would like to see this at least go to a referendum, right? And I think, Joe, you kind of are, I'm almost there. I mean, what's your take on just like writing checks and then selling the budget?
I mean, I think that like that's what I would like to see happen. You know, I know that it's not likely, but that's the side that I'm on just in general, is give more money back to the taxpayer. And, you know.
Oh, the lady was Olga. She's Greg's, she works with Greg in finance.
Oh,
I forgot.
okay. All right.
I don't see Olga very often, so.
I don't know. Yeah. I didn't see her.
Anyways, Joe, how are you going to vote on Monday?
I'm going to vote no.
And you're going to go?
I'm going to try to go.
6
If I'm
o'clock,
not
man.
there, I'll be voting in spirit.
Oh, well, I mean, that doesn't, spirit doesn't really count for much. I'm going to go. I hate to say it, but I think I am going to vote no as well.
Yeah. What time is the vote?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
So, folks at home,
I'll try.
If you guys are opposed to this sort of thing, then I don't care how you want to vote. Please come to this meeting. Please come to the town meeting. The entire town meeting will probably take maybe 10 minutes of your time. 6 o'clock this next Monday before the town council meeting, where there's some other things that I'll have to talk about later on in the show because there's some other things. Steve Harding, if you're watching this, man, please do something about the stuff that we talked about from what the state requires of this town. So,
Can I also say that budget season is starting?
Yeah.
And if you liked at all hearing about any of these things, that's typically what the budget presentations usually are. There's the mayor presents his budget to the town, and then immediately after that, usually like the week after, right?
We have hearings.
Right. We have hearings.
So the entire process is up on my calendar, right up there. If you want to take a look at it, everything in pink.
Right.
So the mayor's presentation is on the 14th.
Valentine's Day. We're
Yep.
gonna love that budget.
Yep. Well, the presentation itself only takes a few minutes. And then the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd are going to be our joint budget hearings.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, that's for you.
Yeah, I know.
The 28th of February, the 1st of March, and the 2nd of March are going to be continued budget hearing dates. And I believe the Monday after that is the snow date for those hearings. And then the town council the next week has their deliberations. The Board of Finance has their deliberations. Before that, they have a public hearing. Once the Board of Finance makes their final decision, it goes out to referendum.
Mm-hmm. And all of those public hearings, right, and the Board of Finance meetings, all that sort of stuff, are all public. And typically, at least the joint budget hearings are live streamed, I think, and on YouTube.
I'll be handling it, yeah.
Right, so you get to see, the whole process. Usually, it's a lot of people just presenting and talking about what they do in the town, and you kind of get to see the inner workings and what each of these line items is for, and it's usually super interesting. Does the Board of Ed do that?
Yes, but they've already completed.
Yeah.
So there's one last question I want to get to before we get started. What is the cost of a referendum these days? Real quick. So the numbers I've heard are between 15 and 20,000. First things first.
20,000.
But the idea that we're talking about as far as having this question beyond the referendum is that the referendum is going to happen in like 3 months.
It's going to happen anyway.
So you just add it as a referendum question on the same referendum.
Yep.
Right? So it wouldn't cost us anything extra to do it.
It would be town
Like
budget, Board of
pennies
Ed
worth of
budget,
ink.
and hey, we have
One
this
question.
extra money.
One question.
Yeah. Would
Yeah.
you like to do these things?
Are you in favor of spending it this way?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the alternative is you get a tax deferral or something.
Yeah.
Anyways, Lisa says last quote I remember was 18K. That sounds about right. Pat Erickson, last thing before we close. Can you put up a list of the hearings for each department? I just got that list this afternoon, Pat. So I'm going to have to build everything over the course of this next few days for the stream, and I'll let everybody know at least the order of presentations as soon as I can get an opportunity to assemble all of that. So anyways, town meeting, 6 o'clock next Monday before the town council meeting at 7. It'll all be live streamed, but you won't get to vote that way. So hopefully we'll see a whole bunch of people there.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Thanks for coming on. Good night, everybody.
Good night.